Let's do a small experiment. Lie on the floor for 5 minutes. Don't move. Now ask yourself, why does a simple flat surface slowly start to feel like it's fighting your body? Lie down on the floor for a moment. Not your bed. Not a sofa. Not a soft carpet pretending to be comfortable. A real floor. Wood, concrete tile. Something firm enough that your body cannot negotiate with it. At first, it seems harmless. You lower yourself carefully, your shoulders touch first, then your hips, then your back settles into place. For a few seconds, it almost feels peaceful. There's a strange honesty in the hardness. No sinking, no floating sensation, just you and gravity. And then something subtle begins, not pain exactly, more like awareness. You suddenly notice your shoulder blade exists. Your hips feel heavier, your neck wants to tilt slightly. Your lower back seems uncertain about where it belongs. Another minute passes, your body begins sending requests. Shift it a little, bend a knee, turn your head. Move your arm. Why? The floor hasn't changed, gravity hasn't changed. Your body hasn't suddenly become injured. Yet your experience is transforming second by second. That is the mystery. Most people think discomfort means damage, but biology is far more interesting than that. The moment you lie on a hard surface, physics enters the conversation. Gravity pulls every part of your body downward toward the earth with relentless consistency. The floor pushes back with equal force. This is one of Newton's great insights. Every action produces an equal and opposite reaction, but the important detail is where that force gets concentrated. Imagine placing a single nail under your hand and leaning your body weight onto it. Terrible idea. The pressure would become enormous because all the force is focused onto one tiny point. Now imagine lying on a bed made of 1,000 nails. Strangely, that becomes survivable. Not because the force disappears, but because it spreads out across a larger area. Your body works the same way. A hard floor does not mold around your shape. It refuses to cooperate. So your weight concentrates onto certain structures. The hips, ribs, shoulder blades, parts of the spine. Tiny regions of tissue suddenly carry far more load than neighboring areas, and your nervous system notices immediately. Under your skin are pressure-sensitive nerve endings, constantly reporting information upward to the brain. They monitor stretching, compression, temperature, vibration, chemical changes, an endless stream of data flowing through the nervous system every second. Normally, movement redistributes these forces. While walking, standing, or even sitting, pressure patterns constantly shift. But lying still on a hard surface creates a strange situation. The same tissues remain compressed continuously, and living tissue dislikes monotony. Blood vessels begin compressing slightly. Muscles maintain tiny stabilizing contractions. Connective tissues deform under load. None of this is catastrophic. In fact, it's completely normal. But your body interprets sustained pressure as something worth paying attention to. So it creates discomfort. Not necessarily because damage is occurring, but because damage could occur if nothing changes. That distinction matters enormously. Pain and discomfort are not simple alarm systems like smoke detectors. They are predictions. Your brain is constantly trying to estimate future risk using incomplete information. In other words, the discomfort you feel on a hard floor is partly physical, and partly a simulation created by your nervous system. And already within the first few minutes of lying still, you begin discovering something unsettling. You do not experience reality directly. You experience your brain's interpretation of reality. One of the strangest misconceptions humans have about the body is the idea that it behaves like a machine built from separate parts. We speak about the body mechanically: a bad back, a slipped disc, a pulled muscle, as if somewhere inside you there is a broken gear that simply needs replacement. But living systems are not assembled like engines. A car can sit motionless in a garage for years without discomfort. Steel beams do not become restless. Concrete does not complain under its own weight. Your body does. And that difference changes everything. The human body is less like a machine and more like a conversation happening between trillions of living cells. Every second, tissues communicate chemically, electrically, mechanically. Muscles pull on bones. Bones reshape themselves according to stress. Nerves monitor tension. Blood vessels adapt continuously to pressure and movement. Nothing is truly still. Even now, while you sit or lie there reading this, countless microscopic adjustments are happening beneath conscious awareness. Your heart subtly shifts your rib cage with every beat. Tiny muscles surrounding the spine contract and release in patterns too small to notice. Fluids move through tissues. Nerves fire signals upward toward the brain. Your lungs gently alter the pressure inside your torso with each breath. You are not a static object. You are an active process. And your spine may be the clearest example of this. People often imagine the spine as a rigid stack of bones holding the body upright like a tower. But the spine is astonishingly dynamic. It contains vertebrae separated by discs filled with fluid-like material that compresses and rebounds constantly throughout the day. When you wake up in the morning, you are actually slightly taller than when you go to sleep, usually by about 1 or 2 centimeters. During the day, gravity compresses the discs between the vertebrae. At night, while lying down, those discs partially re-expand as pressure decreases. Your height literally changes with time. That alone should make the spine seem less like architecture and more like weather. And unlike a machine, your body evolved under conditions where movement was constant. Early humans walked enormous distances. They climbed, squatted, carried, reached, twisted, ran from predators, and adapted continuously to uneven environments. The body developed within motion, not stillness. This is important because many people assume rest is the natural state of the body. It isn't. The human body expects variation. When you lie on a hard surface without moving, certain muscles remain activated for long periods in tiny stabilizing patterns. They aren't working hard enough to create dramatic fatigue like lifting weights in a gym. Instead, they produce something subtler, low-level sustained effort. And biologically, sustained low-level effort can become irritating surprisingly quickly. Imagine holding a small coin between your fingers. It weighs almost nothing. But hold it perfectly still for 20 minutes and discomfort slowly emerges. Not because the weight is large, but because the muscles never get relief. The body prefers rhythm. Tension and release, compression and decompression, movement and adjustment. Life itself depends on cycles. Even blood circulation relies partly on muscular movement. Your muscles help pump blood and lymphatic fluid throughout the body. Stillness interrupts some of that dynamic balance. This helps explain why people instinctively change sleeping positions throughout the night without remembering it. Your nervous system continuously monitors pressure distribution and quietly commands adjustments before tissue stress becomes excessive. You are constantly repositioning to protect yourself automatically. And yet, despite all our technology and medical knowledge, scientists still struggle to fully explain why certain positions become painful for some people but not others. Two individuals can lie on the same floor in nearly identical positions and experience completely different sensations. One feels relaxed. Another feels intense discomfort within minutes. Why? Partly anatomy, partly nervous system sensitivity, partly past injuries, partly expectation, partly brain interpretation. And this reveals something deeply important. Your body is not merely responding to the world. It is actively interpreting it. After about 2 or 3 minutes on a hard surface, the experience begins to change in a way most people never consciously examine. At first, the discomfort feels local. A shoulder presses too firmly. The hips feel dense and heavy. The lower back seems unsupported. But gradually the sensation spreads into something harder to describe. Your body starts feeling less like a collection of separate parts and more like a single connected system under tension. And beneath that feeling, several hidden processes are unfolding simultaneously. One of the first involves blood flow. Every tissue in your body depends on circulation constantly. Blood carries oxygen, glucose, hormones, immune cells, and removes waste products generated by metabolism. This delivery system works quietly and continuously, mostly outside awareness. But pressure changes circulation. When part of your body presses against a hard surface for several minutes, tiny blood vessels within the compressed tissue begin narrowing slightly. Not enough to cause immediate harm, but enough for the nervous system to notice. Imagine stepping gently on a garden hose, water still flows. But less efficiently, the same thing happens inside compressed tissues. Blood flow becomes partially restricted in certain microscopic regions. Oxygen delivery decreases slightly. Waste chemicals begin accumulating more rapidly than normal, and your nervous system is extremely sensitive to chemical imbalance. Specialized sensory neurons detect these changes almost immediately. They monitor acidity, inflammation-related molecules, oxygen levels, and mechanical deformation. Then they send electrical signals upward, through the spinal cord toward the brain. But here's the important part. The signals themselves are not pain. They are information. The brain interprets that information and decides how strongly you should feel it consciously. This is one of the strangest features of human experience. The body doesn't simply detect pain the way a thermometer detects temperature. Instead, the nervous system estimates threat. Your brain is constantly asking, how dangerous is this situation likely to become if nothing changes? If the answer seems unimportant, you may barely notice discomfort. If the answer seems concerning, sensation intensifies dramatically. This is why attention changes pain. The moment you focus intensely on a pressure point, the sensation often grows stronger. Not because the tissue suddenly worsened, but because awareness amplified the brain's interpretation. In a sense, pain behaves partly like vision. Your eyes do not passively record reality like cameras. The brain actively constructs visual experience by selecting, filtering, and predicting information. Much of what you see is actually the brain filling gaps. Works similarly. And while circulation changes beneath you, another system quietly joins the conversation. Your muscles. Most people think lying down means muscles become inactive. Not true. Even in stillness, muscles surrounding the spine continue making tiny stabilizing corrections. Some contract subtly to maintain alignment. Others resist gravity's pull on joints and connective tissues. These contractions are incredibly small, often too weak to notice consciously. But over time, sustained low-level activity creates fatigue. Not dramatic exhaustion, micro-fatigue, the kind that slowly produces an urge to reposition. You shift one leg, rotate a shoulder, bend an arm beneath your head. Without realizing it, you are redistributing force patterns throughout the body. This instinctive repositioning may be one of the nervous system's oldest protective behaviors. Long before humans understood anatomy or neuroscience, the body evolved automatic responses to prolonged pressure. And then there is fascia, one of the most mysterious structures in the human body. For decades, fascia received little scientific attention. Anatomists often treated it like biological wrapping paper, connective tissue surrounding muscles and organs without much importance. Now researchers suspect fascia may be deeply involved in movement, tension distribution, posture, and pain perception. Fascia forms an interconnected web throughout the body. Pull tension in one area, and distant regions may respond mechanically. It behaves less like isolated packaging and more like a continuous fabric woven through the entire organism. When lying on a hard surface, this network deforms under pressure. Tiny tension patterns spread outward through connective tissue chains. Your body does not merely sense hip against floor. It senses relationships between forces across the entire system. And this may explain why discomfort often feels strangely global instead of local. The body experiences itself not as separate components, but as patterns interacting through time. Now we arrive at the truly strange part. Suppose two people lie side by side on the exact same hard floor. Same temperature, same surface, same amount of time. One person says, "This is mildly uncomfortable." The other says, "My back is killing me, what happened?" At first glance, this seems impossible. Physics should be objective. The floor exerts force. Tissue compresses. Nerves respond. Cause and effect. But human experience refuses to behave so simply, because pain is not produced directly by the body. Pain is produced by the brain. That sentence makes many people uncomfortable because it sounds like pain is imaginary. But that's not what it means at all. Vision is also produced by the brain. Sound is produced by the brain. Color, taste, smell, balance. All conscious experience is constructed internally from electrical signals. Your brain never directly touches the outside world. It sits in darkness inside the skull, receiving streams of nerve impulses and trying to build a useful model of reality. That model is what you experience as life. When pressure receptors in your back fire signals upward through the nervous system, the brain must interpret them. It asks questions automatically and unconsciously. How intense is the pressure? How long has it lasted? Has this happened before? Could damage occur? Should movement be encouraged? Then the brain generates sensation accordingly. This explains one of the strangest findings in pain science. Tissue damage and pain often do not match very well. Some people have severe spinal degeneration visible on medical scans yet report almost no pain. Others suffer debilitating back pain despite scans appearing relatively normal. This puzzled scientists for decades. How could pain exist without obvious injury? And how could injury exist without pain? Because pain is not simply a damage meter. It is a protective prediction system. The brain's primary goal is survival, not accuracy. If your nervous system believes a movement or position might threaten the body, it may increase pain signals to encourage caution. Sometimes this protection is useful. Sometimes it becomes exaggerated. Think about phantom limb pain. A person loses an arm, yet still feels pain in fingers that no longer exist. How is that possible? Because pain is ultimately generated by neural activity inside the brain, not by the missing limb itself. The brain's body map remains active even when physical tissue disappears. That realization changes how we think about reality itself. Most people imagine they experience the world directly, as though consciousness were a window opening outward onto objective reality. But neuroscience suggests something far stranger. You experience a simulation, not a fake simulation. A useful one. Your brain constantly predicts the world before sensory information fully arrives. In fact, many scientists now believe perception works largely through prediction rather than passive reception. The brain builds expectations first. Then sensory input corrects the model. This happens with vision, with sound, with movement, and with pain. Imagine walking upstairs in the dark and believing there is one more step than actually exists. Your foot reaches downward expecting support that never comes. For a split second, your whole body jolts violently. Why? Because the brain predicted one reality and encountered another. The error signal creates shock. Pain and discomfort often operate similarly. Expectations shape sensation. If someone believes hard floors are dangerous for the spine, discomfort may intensify rapidly. If another person associates hard surfaces with relaxation or athletic training, the same pressure may feel far less threatening. Culture influences pain, mirror influences pain, fear influences pain, attention influences pain, even language matters. Studies have shown that the words doctors use can alter patients' pain experiences dramatically. Telling someone their spine is damaged or degenerating may increase fear and sensitivity, even when the findings are common and harmless age-related changes. The brain listens carefully to meaning, and this creates an enormous scientific challenge. Pain cannot be fully measured from outside the person experiencing it. Doctors can scan tissues, measure inflammation, observe nerve activity, but conscious experience itself remains private. You can describe pain, but no one else can directly feel your version of it. Which means that even something as ordinary as lying on a hard floor reveals one of the deepest mysteries in science. How does physical matter generate subjective experience at all? Nobody fully knows. And perhaps the strangest thing is this: the question is being asked by the very system trying to understand itself. Now imagine a scientist from another planet visiting Earth for the first time. It studies humans carefully and notices something peculiar. Every night, billions of people voluntarily place themselves onto large padded rectangles before losing consciousness for several hours. The alien becomes curious. Why softness? From a purely structural perspective, hard surfaces seem superior. Stone does not sag. Concrete does not deform. A perfectly rigid surface supports the body evenly according to simple mechanical rules. So why don't humans sleep happily on rock? At first, the alien might assume humans are simply fragile creatures. But that explanation would quickly fail. Humans can survive astonishing physical hardship. They climb mountains, run ultramarathons, endure freezing temperatures, carry enormous loads, and recover from injuries that would destroy many animals. So the issue isn't weakness. The issue is biology interacting with pressure over time. And time changes everything. If you place a glass cup on a table for 5 seconds, nothing interesting happens. Leave it balanced on a tiny sharp point for months, and microscopic stresses may eventually crack the glass. Living tissue behaves similarly, except far more dynamically. Your body is not merely trying to resist gravity. It is trying to distribute force continuously while maintaining circulation, nerve signaling, fluid movement, joint stability, and metabolic activity all at once. That is an incredibly complicated engineering problem. A mattress is not simply a comfort object. It is a pressure distribution system. Soft surfaces deform beneath you. They increase contact area. This spreads force across larger regions of the body, reducing pressure concentration at vulnerable points like the hips, shoulders, and spine. But here's the fascinating part. Too much softness also creates problems. A hammock may feel pleasant briefly, but if a surface deforms excessively, the spine can become misaligned relative to muscle tension patterns. Certain tissues stretch while others compress unnaturally, so the ideal sleeping surface is not infinitely soft or perfectly hard. It is a compromise. And human existence itself is full of compromises. The spine, for example, is not designed for a single perfect posture. There is no universally correct position that eliminates all stress permanently. Different tissues tolerate load differently across time. What feels comfortable for 10 minutes may become irritating after 2 hours. The body constantly negotiates changing forces. This becomes even stranger when we leave Earth entirely. Astronauts in space provide one of the most fascinating natural experiments in human biomechanics. On Earth, gravity continuously compresses the spine downward. The discs between vertebrae remain under constant load from body weight and muscular stabilization. In orbit, much of that compression disappears. And something surprising happens. Astronauts often become taller. Without gravity squeezing the spinal column, the discs partially expand. Some astronauts gain several centimeters in height temporarily during space missions. At first glance, this sounds wonderful. Less compression should mean less back discomfort, right? But many astronauts actually experience significant back pain in microgravity. Why? Because the human body evolved expecting gravity. Your muscles, joints, connective tissues, and nervous system all developed under conditions where down existed constantly. Remove that familiar mechanical environment and the body becomes confused. Muscles activate differently. Spinal curves change. Pressure distribution alters dramatically. The body is adapted not for perfect comfort, but for Earth. And this reveals a deeper truth people often misunderstand about evolution. Evolution does not create ideal systems. It creates workable systems. There is no master engineer designing perfect backs for maximum comfort. Natural selection simply preserves traits that improve survival and reproduction enough to continue into future generations. If a trait causes discomfort later in life but still allows reproduction earlier, evolution may barely care. This is why the human spine is both remarkable and flawed. Our upright posture gave enormous advantages. Standing vertically freed the hands for carrying tools, throwing objects, building shelters, caring for children, and manipulating the environment in ways few species can match. But upright posture also concentrated mechanical stress onto the lower spine in ways quadrupedal animals largely avoid. Human backs are evolutionary compromises between stability, flexibility, energy efficiency, and mobility, not perfection. And perhaps this is why lying on a hard floor feels so revealing. The floor strips away modern softness and exposes the raw negotiation between gravity and biology. For a few quiet minutes, you become aware of something usually hidden beneath daily life. Your body is not a finished machine resting peacefully in the world. It is an unstable balancing act continuously adapting to physical reality. The lower back is one of the most mechanically stressed structures in the human body, and yet most people rarely think about it until something hurts. Right now, even while sitting quietly or lying down, your lower spine is solving an extraordinarily complicated physics problem without asking for your attention. It balances the weight of the upper body, coordinates movement between the torso and pelvis, stabilizes posture, protects nerves, and absorbs force generated by walking, bending, twisting, and lifting, all day long for decades. And it performs this task using living tissue, not steel. That alone is astonishing. The lower portion of the spine, the lumbar region, carries much of the body's weight because humans stand upright. This creates a structural arrangement unlike most mammals. A dog or cat distributes weight horizontally across 4 limbs. The spine acts more like a bridge suspended between supports. Humans stack weight vertically, head above chest, chest above pelvis, pelvis above legs. This means gravity compresses the lumbar spine continuously throughout life. To handle this, the lower back evolved with a natural inward curve called lumbar lordosis. That curve is not a design flaw. It functions like an architectural arch, helping distribute force and maintain balance efficiently. But curves create complexity. When you lie flat on a hard surface, the shape of the body interacts awkwardly with the rigidity of the floor. Some parts press firmly downward while other areas remain partially suspended. For many people, the lower back does not fully touch the ground when lying flat. A small gap may remain beneath the lumbar curve. This seems insignificant. But biologically, tiny geometric differences matter enormously. A few millimeters of altered positioning can change how muscles activate, how ligaments stretch, how discs experience compression, and how nerves respond to surrounding tissues. The body is extremely sensitive to force distribution. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack. If the straps fit correctly, the load spreads across the shoulders and torso relatively comfortably. But if one strap digs into a small area near the neck, discomfort appears quickly even though the total weight hasn't changed. The problem is not simply force, it is concentrated force. Your lower back experiences the same principle against a hard surface. Certain regions absorb more pressure, while neighboring structures compensate to maintain alignment. And the nervous system constantly monitors this imbalance. This helps explain why people instinctively bend their knees when lying on a hard floor. That small adjustment changes pelvic tilt, alters spinal curvature, redistributes muscular tension, and often reduces discomfort almost immediately. A tiny movement changes the entire mechanical equation. That's because the body operates less like a stack of isolated components and more like a connected tension network. Pull one part, and distant regions respond. Architects sometimes use a concept called tensesquity structures. These systems maintain stability through continuous balance between compression and tension, rather than relying entirely on rigid support. Some researchers believe the human body behaves similarly. Bones resist compression. Muscles and fascia maintain tension. Together they create dynamic stability. This means your lower back is never working alone. The hips, abdomen, diaphragm, pelvic floor, glutes, and even the rib cage contribute to spinal mechanics continuously. Breathing itself changes spinal pressure. Every inhale slightly alters pressure inside the abdomen and chest. Deep breathing can subtly stabilize or destabilize the lumbar region depending on posture and muscular coordination. In other words, your spine is not simply holding you upright. It is participating in an active fluid pressure system integrated with movement and respiration. And then there are the discs. Spinal discs are often misunderstood as simple cushions between bones. In reality, they are remarkable hydraulic structures. Each disc contains a gel-like center surrounded by fibrous layers designed to manage compression while allowing flexibility. Throughout the day, these discs constantly change shape under load. When standing, gravity compresses them. When bending forward, pressure shifts direction. When twisting, internal stresses redistribute asymmetrically. And when lying on a hard surface, pressure patterns become unusually static. This is important because biological tissues generally tolerate changing forces better than unchanging ones. Movement distributes stress, stillness localizes it. That's one reason remaining in any position too long eventually becomes uncomfortable. Even if the posture itself isn't inherently dangerous, the body prefers variation more than perfection. And perhaps that reveals something profound about life itself. Living systems survive not through rigid stability, but through constant adaptation. If you remain on a hard surface long enough, another sensation may begin to appear. Not exactly pain, not exactly pressure, something stranger, a tingling arm, a numb hip, pins and needles creeping slowly through the leg, a hand that suddenly feels distant from the rest of the body. Most people experience this regularly, yet few stop to ask what is actually happening. At first glance, numbness feels simple. We assume the body part has somehow fallen asleep. But biologically, the process is far more fascinating. Your nervous system operates through electrical and chemical signaling. Nerves are not hollow tubes carrying sensations like water through pipes. They are living cells transmitting electrochemical pulses generated by tiny movements of charged particles across membranes. Every sensation you experience, pressure, heat, texture, pain, depends on these electrical signals traveling reliably through enormous networks of neurons. And nerves are surprisingly sensitive to pressure. When you lie on a hard surface for several minutes, certain nerves may become partially compressed, along with nearby blood vessels and soft tissue. Usually, this is harmless and temporary. But compression changes how nerves conduct information. Imagine bending a fiber optic cable carrying digital data. The cable may not break completely, but the signal becomes distorted. Information arrives inconsistently. Something similar happens inside compressed nerves. Signals may slow down, misfire, become exaggerated, or fail temporarily altogether. The brain receives confusing information and tries to interpret it. That interpretation becomes sensation. This is where things become philosophically strange. The tingling itself does not physically exist inside the arm or leg in the way people intuitively imagine. There are no tiny pins or needles embedded in tissue. What exists physically are altered electrical patterns traveling through neurons. The sensation emerges only when the brain interprets those patterns consciously. In other words, numbness is not discovered by consciousness, it is created by consciousness. This sounds abstract until you realize the same principle applies to nearly everything you experience. Color does not exist objectively in the outside world as we perceive it. Light consists of electromagnetic wavelengths. The brain translates portions of that spectrum into the experience we call red, blue, green, and yellow. Sound works similarly. Air molecules vibrate. The nervous system converts pressure waves into music, speech, and noise. Even solidity is partly an illusion of perception. At the atomic level, the matter composing your body and the floor beneath you is mostly empty space. The feeling of touch emerges because electromagnetic forces prevent atoms from occupying the same location. You never truly contact the floor in the classical sense. Fields interact with fields, and your brain turns those invisible interactions into the experience of pressure. This becomes especially clear during nerve compression, because perception starts behaving strangely. A limb may feel enormous, absent, distorted, burning, or detached, despite no dramatic physical change occurring externally. The brain's body map becomes unstable, and this reveals something scientists still struggle to fully explain. The brain does not simply record the body. It actively models the body. Neuroscientists sometimes call this internal representation the body schema. A constantly updated simulation of your physical self constructed by the nervous system. That simulation is usually accurate enough for survival, but under unusual conditions, it can become bizarre. People who lose limbs sometimes continue feeling phantom fingers decades later. Others experience the sensation that a limb belongs to someone else after certain brain injuries. Some neurological disorders even convince people that parts of their own body are unreal. The line between physical reality and conscious experience is far stranger than common sense suggests. And lying still on a hard surface exposes tiny glimpses of that hidden complexity. As pressure builds and nerves alter their signaling, your awareness becomes unstable in subtle ways. The body no longer feels invisible and automatic. Sensations become exaggerated. Attention narrows inward. You begin noticing processes normally hidden beneath consciousness. The quiet hum of circulation, the weight of gravity, the geometry of joints, the fragile reliability of sensation itself. And perhaps the strangest realization is this. Your experience of having a body is not fixed. It is continuously constructed moment by a nervous system trying to interpret an incomprehensibly complex world from inside a dark skull. People often ask a very reasonable question. If the human back is so vulnerable to discomfort, why didn't evolution fix it? Why would nature produce a species capable of building spacecraft, solving equations, and transforming entire planets, while also creating creatures whose lower backs complain after lying on the floor too long? The answer begins with understanding something uncomfortable about evolution itself. Evolution is not an engineer. It has no foresight, no blueprint, no final goal. Natural selection does not build perfection. It merely preserves traits that are good enough to survive and reproduce under specific conditions. That distinction changes everything. Humans often imagine evolution as a process marching steadily toward improvement, as though life were climbing a ladder toward ideal design. But biology behaves less like careful engineering and more like endless improvisation. Evolution modifies existing structures rather than starting from scratch. And the human spine is a perfect example of this. Your back was not originally designed for upright walking. The distant ancestors of humans moved on four limbs. Their spines evolved primarily for horizontal posture, distributing weight across multiple support points. In that arrangement, gravity acts differently on the skeleton. Then, relatively recently in evolutionary history, some primates began standing upright more consistently. This changed the entire mechanical situation. Suddenly, the spine became a vertical column supporting the weight of the head, torso, and arms above the pelvis. Muscles adapted. Pelvic structure changed. Spinal curves evolved. Balance systems became more sophisticated, but evolution had to work with pre-existing anatomy. It was like renovating an old building for a completely different purpose, while people were still living inside it. The result is extraordinary, but imperfect. Walking upright gave humans enormous advantages. Standing vertically freed the hands for carrying food, using tools, throwing objects accurately, caring for children, and manipulating the environment in ways few species can match. Upright posture also improved long-distance walking efficiency, allowing early humans to travel vast distances across open landscapes. The benefits were massive, but every adaptation creates trade-offs. A spine optimized for flexibility may sacrifice stability. A structure optimized for stability may reduce mobility. A lighter skeleton improves energy efficiency but increases vulnerability to injury. Biology constantly balances competing demands. And because survival mattered more than comfort, evolution prioritized functionality over long-term spinal perfection. This explains something important people often misunderstand about pain. Discomfort does not necessarily indicate failure. Pain evolved because organisms capable of detecting potential damage survived more effectively than organisms that ignored harmful conditions. Imagine placing your hand near fire. A creature unable to feel pain might leave its hand there until catastrophic injury occurred. A creature experiencing rapid discomfort would withdraw immediately and survive longer. Pain is protective. The problem is that modern human life differs dramatically from the environments where these systems evolved. For most of human history, movement was unavoidable. People walked long distances daily, changed posture constantly, squatted frequently, climbed uneven terrain, and rarely remained motionless for extended periods on artificial surfaces. Today, many humans spend enormous portions of life sitting in chairs, driving vehicles, staring at screens, and sleeping on engineered materials unlike anything found in ancestral environments. The body evolved for dynamic variation. Modern life often produces mechanical repetition, and the nervous system responds accordingly. But there's another deeper reason evolution never eliminated back discomfort completely. Natural selection weakens dramatically after reproduction. If a trait causes severe problems before reproductive age, it tends to disappear over generations because affected individuals leave fewer descendants. But lower back pain often becomes significant later in life, sometimes decades after reproduction already occurred. From evolution's perspective, that may not strongly affect genetic success. Nature is indifferent to comfort after reproductive survival has been achieved. This sounds harsh because humans instinctively search for purpose and fairness in biology. But evolution is not moral. It does not care whether organisms are happy. It simply filters traits according to reproductive consequences across time. And despite its flaws, the human spine performs astonishingly well. Think about what your back endures over a lifetime. Millions of steps, countless bends and twists, years of compression. Impacts, lifting, carrying, falling, aging. Yet most people remain functional for decades. That is remarkable. Perhaps the real mystery is not why backs sometimes hurt. Perhaps the mystery is why living tissue can withstand gravity for 80 years at all. And maybe that changes how we should see the body. Not as a failed machine constantly breaking, but as an ancient biological compromise, performing miracles under impossible conditions. Despite centuries of anatomy, medicine, and neuroscience, Scientists still do not fully understand back pain. That may sound surprising. Modern medicine can replace joints, transplant organs, map brain activity, and observe individual cells under microscopes. We can measure electrical impulses traveling through nerves and watch muscles activate in real time. And yet one of the most common human experiences, an aching back, remains deeply mysterious. Part of the problem is that pain refuses to behave like a simple mechanical system. People desperately want straightforward explanations. A disc slipped. A nerve got trapped. A muscle became damaged. Sometimes those explanations are partly correct, but often they are incomplete. Medical imaging has revealed something astonishing over the last few decades. Many people with severe-looking spinal abnormalities on MRI scans feel little or no pain. At the same time, others suffer intense chronic pain despite relatively unremarkable scans. Bulging discs, degeneration, asymmetry, and structural irregularities are extremely common even among people without symptoms. In other words, the body does not always experience structural change as suffering. That realization forced scientists to rethink the entire concept of pain. For a long time, medicine treated pain mostly as a direct signal flowing from injured tissue toward the brain. Tissue damage happened first. Pain followed automatically, but reality appears much more complicated. Pain emerges from interactions between the body, the nervous system, memory, attention, emotion, expectation, context, and prediction. This creates enormous scientific difficulty because every human nervous system is unique. Two people can experience identical physical forces and report completely different levels of suffering. Why? Because no two brains interpret danger in exactly the same way. One nervous system may classify a sensation as harmless background information. Another may interpret the same input as threatening. And once pain becomes chronic, the nervous system itself may change. Researchers now believe prolonged pain can increase sensitivity within neural pathways. The brain and spinal cord may begin amplifying signals more aggressively over time, almost like an audio system with the volume knob turned too high. This process is sometimes called central sensitization. In such cases, the pain becomes real even if obvious tissue injury is minimal or healed. That distinction matters enormously. People suffering chronic pain are often told, "It's all in your head," as though that makes the experience less real. But every conscious experience is produced in the head. Fear exists in the brain. Love exists in the brain. Music exists in the brain. Color exists in the brain. The fact that pain depends on neural processing does not make it imaginary. It makes it biological. And this leads us into one of the deepest unsolved problems in science. Consciousness itself. Neuroscience can identify brain regions associated with pain processing. Researchers can observe patterns of activity linked to discomfort, fear, and sensation, but there remains a profound mystery. How does electrical activity inside neurons become subjective experience? Why should nerve signals feel like anything at all? A computer processes information without suffering. A calculator performs operations without awareness. But somehow, collections of biological cells produce the experience of pain, emotion, memory, and selfhood. No one fully understands how. This mystery is sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness. And remarkably, your aching back connects directly to it. When lying on a hard floor, billions of neurons exchange electrochemical signals throughout your nervous system. Pressure receptors activate, muscles adjust. Blood flow changes. The spinal cord transmits information upward. Yet nowhere inside the brain can scientists find a tiny location where pain itself exists physically. There are only neurons communicating. And somehow, from those interactions, conscious experience emerges. Humans struggle with this idea because the brain did not evolve to understand itself completely. Evolution optimized the nervous system for survival, not for philosophical accuracy. Your perceptions are useful approximations of reality, not perfect representations of truth. The world feels solid, stable, and obvious because that interpretation helps organisms function effectively. But beneath ordinary experience lies staggering complexity. Even the sensation of your back touching the floor is a constructed model, assembled from incomplete information. And perhaps this is why pain remains so difficult to explain scientifically. Pain is not merely a physical event. It is a meeting point between matter and consciousness, between biology and experience, between objective measurement and private reality. And science is still learning how to cross that boundary.